No, no buzz. A Just Bees book club. Today I'm going to talk about the novel debut, the debut novel uh, by Werner Herzog, famed director of Aguirre, The Wrath of God, of Grizzly Man, of Fitzcarraldo, of Stroysek, of many films that I deeply love. Aguirre I probably love more than anything else of his. But he wrote this book, The Twilight World. Let me just kind of read you the pitch because I think it's a weirdly compelling one. In 1997, Werner Herzog was in Tokyo to direct an opera. His hosts asked him, "Whom would you like to meet?" He replied instantly, "Hiro Onoda." Onoda was a former soldier famous for having quixotically defended an island in the Philippines for decades after World War II, unaware the fighting was over. Herzog and Onoda, developed an instant rapport and would meet many times, talking for hours and together unraveling the story of Onoda's long war. Um, yes, so this is a book about a Japanese Imperial Army holdout, told sort of from his perspective by Herzog. I guess I should also read this other thing, which is both the most Herzog-ass way to um do the like all characters in this novel are fake or whatever that like is in all copyright. Um oh Jesus. Sorry, I just flipped to this page and I didn't realize that this is Penguin Press, an imprint of Penguin Random House LLC, copyright 2021 by Werner Herzog. Penguin supports copyright. Copyright fuels creativity, encourages diverse voices, promotes free speech, and creates a vibrant culture. Thank you for buying an authorized edition of this book and for complying with copyright laws by not reproducing, scanning, or distributing any part of it in any form without permission. You are supporting writers and allowing Penguin to continue to publish books for every reader. That's a fun one. That's some, hey, that's some ideology. Um, the thing I was going to, speaking of fucking labels, um, uh, there's on the last video, the food related stories video at the end, I posted a thing I did find after I had recorded it. That is a round table of the pocket change collective as it is. There's a couple other things on YouTube that I hadn't actually seen before because they are videos with like 200 views, like live streamed 2 hour long videos with 200 views. You know what I'm talking about. Uh, Motherfuckers really went for it during the pandemic, huh? And we're still going for it. Hi, welcome to No Buzz. This is the most Herzogian way to start a fictionalized, a literary nonfiction book. It's not a literary nonfiction. It's a historical fiction, I guess. I've been running up this, whatever. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Most details are factually correct. Some are not. It's the first sentence on this page. There's no like acknowledgments here. There's no disclaimer here. Like there's no heading to this page. Most details are factually correct. Some are not. What was important to the author was something other than accuracy, some essence he thought he glimpsed when he encountered the protagonist of this story. Which I think if you have seen, especially things like Aguirre and My Best Fiend, and I guess like anything he did with with Kinski, um, I don't know. At least for me, that strikes a very Herzogian tone. Um, if you've ever heard the clip of Herzog describing nature as a oh it's been a minute. Google Herzog nature quote. I believe you can find it. Yes, I think that's I have already rabbit holed. Leaving the rabbit hole. This is a complicated book that I fell very strange about. I think at a very high sort of literary level, um, it's actually a really well constructed novel, I guess. It starts with a very uh, yeah. In 1997, I was in Tokyo to direct the opera Tushingura. Uh, that's the first sentence. It is very much like Herzog placing himself there in history, establishing the sort of factual basis of this story. The thing it goes on to do is like the emperor wants to meet Herzog, and he's like, "Oh, I would just do small talk with the emperor," and then everyone's like, "Oh my God, you just denied or you just refused a meeting with the emperor? That's kind of fucked." And then somebody politely asks, like, "Who would you want to meet?" And his answer is Hiro, um, Onoda. Um, and then a week later, I met him, as it says at the end of the first chapter. Then the next chapter is the moment when Onoda meets with oh wait, no, the next chapter is yeah, in the jungle, Lubong, A Path in the Jungle in 1974. This is the year that Onoda surrenders. So the story starts with Herzog meeting Onoda, Onoda meeting, and then yeah, like 20 years earlier, Onoda meeting with a Japanese citizen in the forest, and sort of beginning the process of becoming of ending his own private 30-year war, as I think his biography is called, which is bizarre. Uh, Again, speaking largely structurally about the literary merits of this, I think this is a really strong opening. It's really like compelling, and then from there it just sort of like leaps back to December of 1944, and it's sort of, and from that point on, it's mostly a linear experience of Onoda's time in Lubang, in the island in the Philippines that he was sort of covertly stationed in, um, as he meets up with a handful of other, or like he meets up with the people he was meant there to be there with, and then a bunch of them bail, and he ends up with like three other dudes, and the four of them like sort of travel together for like a decade, and then one of them surrenders, and then the last three of them hang on for decades more, and like about their time in the jungle, about what it's like to survive in the jungle, of this small island in the Philippines. Um, how he, it's a lot about how he convinces himself or and convinces his sort of subordinates of what little communication they're getting, why that is actually propaganda or an attempt to make them to like trick them of some of the ambushes that he has experienced throughout those times. um and there's like an interesting thread that does seem like maybe the fictional bit, but I'm not really sure because I'm not a scholar here. But like there's a bit where Onoda sort of basically um like figures out satellites by himself, because he sees like a light in the sky, like near the poles, and he like works out on his own time how and why people would launch satellites, um, which is a very strange little passage. But yes, again, high level. It goes through sort of, it sort of follows his time linearly with like large time jumps. Obviously, this is a what, like 130-page small novel. So it's not like the old Drift, which really like it's not like a Ulysses kind of thing. You're not following a day for 300 pages. Um, but it's presented very linearly, and then sort of at the end it sort of wraps back around to like it sort of ends, or the end of the frame is right before Onoda meets up with, I believe his name is Suzuki, um who is the person that, um, yeah, Suzuki. Uh, they are the ones who talk, and that leads to Onoda properly, or like having a decommissioned military commander come over to the island and basically say like, "Hey, the war is over. It has been for 26 years." Um, so it wraps back to that point. We get that resolution, and then we get a little bit more of Herzog and Onoda's time together. I think this is like a really successfully written book. I think this is really like compelling. It has just enough of that like that sort of Herzogian cadence that I'm sure people know from the fucking Simpsons or Parks and Recreation or whatever, or his incredible documentaries of yeah, et cetera, et cetera. He's been he's been a person who has said a lot of things in a lot of different settings for a very long time, and he has a very unique voice, and not just in an accent sense, but in a way where he will tend to like how do you specifically say this? He will he will pull back from like a question asked of him and respond in a way that is not absurdist, but there's a sort of comedy to it. But there's also like, because of the very deeply sincere sort of philosophical underpinnings that it's clear he is expressing. Um, yeah, he has a very specific tone, and I think it's actually like more well known than I think it is. Um, but yeah, so it ends up with um, or it follows his voice in a really clear way, and that like allows for these really interesting digressions. I wonder if I can find it on page 61. I've had a very long day. That other video was I recorded that this morning before I went to work, and then I went to work, and now I'm back from work, and I'm recording this. Um, do uh, yeah, I think this is the yes. Okay, so this is after the first time. Hold on. The the four of them are together. This is like page 58 in the advanced reader copy that I'm reading from. Um, as they say on all advanced reader copies, you can't quote from this. Um, they have just found the first leaflets that have dropped, saying like, "Hey, the war is over." They have a sort of meeting where they all talk, and they decide they are going to stay together, the four of them. And there's like a page break or a line break sort of thing, a segment thing. I used to know this used to be a technical writer. I could name this in Word in a second, a decade ago. Um, and now I'm going to read a full page. At this point, incidentally, a new phenomenon begins, a sort of constant, unobtrusive companionship, a natural dream sibling equipped with all the unquestioning certainty of dreams, a shapeless time of noctambulism, even though things carry on as before, immediate, palpable, ghastly, undeniable in their imperiousness. The jungle, the swamp, the leeches, the mosquitoes, the scream of the birds, thirst, the bumpy, itching skin. The dream has its own time frame. It races forward and back, it sticks, stops dead, holds its breath, jumps ahead like a frightened deer. A nightbird shrieks and a year passes. A fat drop of water on the waxy leaf of a banana plant glistens briefly in the sun, and another year is gone. A column of millions and millions of ants arrives overnight and marches through the trees with no beginning or end. The column marches for days and days, and then one day is mysteriously and suddenly gone, and that is another year. Then one single watch under withering enemy fire, and the night seems to go on forever and ever. Only the abrupt flares of tracer bullets while day refuses to break, even though you look at your watch and see the hands moving and see the whole of the night sky wheeling around the North Star. Day will not, and will not, and will not arrive. Time outside their lives seems to have the quality of a spasm, even though it can't shake the imperturbable universe. Onoda's war is of no meaning for the cosmos, for history, for the course of the war. Onoda's war is formed from the union of an imaginary nothing and a dream, but Onoda's war, sired by nothing, is nevertheless overwhelming, and an event extorted from eternity. Um, yes, I did not try to read that in Herzog's voice, obviously, but I think that gives a sense of the way that I mean that both like at a broad level, its literary structure is really interesting, and it not really interesting, but like really well executed. Um, the way that it knows when to pull back from the narration of a particular life and sort of give a broader sense through a moment or an absence of a moment in that life is very good. Um, I think that passage does that very well. If you disagree, I don't care because you're not watching this. Um, okay, part two of this video. There is a moment right very close to the end where this is in the bit after Onoda has recognized that the war is over, is gone, and Herzog has become his friend, or at least somebody who talks to him semi frequently. Um, do Onoda long refused to accept soldier's pay for his 28 years. Only when pressed by his family, did he finally accept the money, donating it right away to the Yasukuni Shrine. There, from the mid 19th century, the names of now 2.5 million people who had lost their lives for the fatherland were kept. And then, parenthetically, strangely, also the names of some of their domestic animals. The shrine is a somewhat controversial institution because it also houses the names of about 1,000 convicted war criminals. At first, I hesitated to follow Onoda's invitation. He wanted to show me the remnants of his tattered uniform, which was kept there. As Onoda had been officially declared dead in 1959, there had been no signs of life for him for a long time, and it was assumed that he had died in the same ambush in which Shimida had been killed, or that he had been mortally wounded like Kozuka. His name had been registered there for many years. It took 2 weeks of negotiations between Onoda and the head of the shrine before I was invited. I accepted the invitation, thinking, who am I anyway to allow myself the luxury of such reservations, coming as I do from a country that has brought such horrors upon other countries and peoples. Um, because this is kind of the thing, right? This is the this is the thing about this book. Um, Onoda is a man who signed up for the fascist Japanese Imperial Army, who was trained in guerrilla warfare, who went to the Philippines to defend. Um, well, it's never mentioned in this book, but what you know, Japan would have probably been conceiving at the time as the Greater East Asian or the Greater Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. Greater is it was it the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere or was it the Greater Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere? Um, you know, the project to turn all countries into Japan, into you know, uh, to say, you know, we're not going to ethnically cleanse everyone, but we just need to have like a really strong leadership that you know would just happen to be us. Um, you know, we're just kind of like allies with Hitler and Mussolini. Um, this is a man who spent 30 years after that project ended continuing to uphold it. It's a man who I believe, and I did only some very cursory Wikipedia research, but this is also sort of referenced in Herzog's The Twilight World, who may have killed as many as 30 Filipino civilians on this island in his 2.5 decades there. Um, who, and if we take this as a sort of memoir by proxy, um, who seems to have admitted to Herzog directly that he killed people and stole. In the Twilight World version, it's Twilight World version is that sounds like something very different. In this particular book that is called The Twilight World, um, he only stole things, or he stole honorably. Basically, he would only take rice. He wouldn't take goods. He would only take screwdrivers and hammers. Like he learned to make palm oil on his own, which seems probably true in his Buck Wild. But this is the thing: spending 20 pages reading about this fascist learning to make palm oil from scratch. It feels complicated. It feels a little complicated. It feels a little complicated. And Herzog's response to being invited to the shrine that houses the memory of convicted war criminals. And I say convicted war criminals because how many war criminals get convicted? Like what? Like a quarter of a percent of them? A half of a percent? um the shrine that fucking Shinzo Abe so frequently visited. Fucking the Reagan of Japan. Um, this is a book that asks you, or that it tries to impel you to sympathize with and humanize a genuine fascist by way of his struggles. Which, huh, huh, my struggles, or something like that, something like that. Uh, and I mean, I, I think I think fuck that dude. I mean, like, sucks that he spent a bunch of time in the jungle, I guess. But like, fuck that dude. Also from a cursory Wikipedia thing, sort of corroborated by the book. It sounds like when he got back to Japan, he was not happy with the way the country had progressed, and he ended up in Brazil for a little while. And then he moved back and sort of taught like survival skills and nature living in Japan for a long time. Seems like he also got married while maybe in Brazil. And let me just, sorry, this is going to light up my face a little bit, but um, do, where was that sentence? The thing about his wife. Yeah, there we go. Um, yeah, I'll just read this paragraph. Although Hiro Onoda never apologized or expressed any remorse for killing about 30 Filipino civilians, mostly farmers, stealing their food and burning their crops, then President Ferdinand Marcos granted him a full pardon in a televised ceremony. As a result, controversy followed when Onoda revisited Lubang Island in 1996 because his wife, Machie Onoda ne Honoku, had arranged a $10,000 scholarship on his behalf to the local school there. In 2006, Machi Onoda became the head of the right-wing conservative Japan Women's Association, JWA, established by the far-right group Nippon Kaigi in September 2001. The Nippon Kaigi, I have clicked to do a different page here, is Japan's largest far-right, ultra-conservative, and ultra-nationalist non-governmental organization and lobby. It was established in 1997 and has approximately 40,000 members as of 2020. The group is influential in the legislative and executive branches of the Japanese government through its affiliates. Former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe serves as a special advisor to the group's parliamentary league. Huh. Huh. What a group of fascists there, isn't it? Abe, Marcos, Onoda. Huh. Strange. Strange to read a very well constructed little novel by a director whose work I deeply admire, all about sympathizing with this weird little fascist man. The last thing I will say here. Um, this isn't getting Griever's level long, huh? The last thing I will say is that I think there's a really cogent and interesting reading of this book as deeply anti-war. Um, there are moments. It's actually like right at the beginning in the conversation with Suzuki. Let's see if I can't find it for really quickly. Um, do 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 do. Sorry. Uh, for the first time, there's a flicker of amusement on Onoda's face. He nods to Suzuki. Go on, don't stop. Suzuki feels encouraged. The war ended 29 years ago. Utter expressionless incomprehension from Onoda. That can't be. Japan capitulated in August 1945. The war is not over. A couple of days ago, I saw an American aircraft carrier accompanied by a destroyer and a frigate. Heading east, I suspect, says Suzuki. Don't try to trick me. I see what I see. Suzuki remained insistent. Lieutenant, the Americans have their biggest naval base in Subic Bay. All their navy ships are refitted and equipped here. The Bay of Manila? That's only 90 kilometers away. Yes. That base existed at the beginning of the war. How do American ships now come and use it? The US and Philippines are allies. What about the planes? The fighters and bombers? I see them all the time. They're heading for Clark Air Base north of the Bay of Manila. With such huge forces, Lieutenant, why wouldn't the enemy simply overrun Lubang? After all, Lubang controls access to the Bay of Manila. I am not privy to the enemy's plans. There are no more plans. The war is over. Um, do, 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 do. There's some more about the atom bomb and other things. Uh, and the announcement of the emperor that he's not God. Such a pronouncement is so inconceivable to Onoda that he takes it as final proof that Suzuki has come on a mission to deceive him. He drills the muzzle of the rifle between Suzuki's eyes. No, the truth is that the war has gone on. Perhaps it just carried on elsewhere. But Suzuki remains adamant. In the West, Germany lost. They surrendered before the Japanese did. No, says Onoda, the war went on, and it went on in the West as well. What I saw is proof. Proof? What do you mean, proof? I saw wave after wave of American warplanes flying overhead, right here, going that way, west. When was this? It went on for years. Beginning when? In 1950. Also bombers and troop transporters, naval ships. That was the Korean War. Korean War? What Korean War? Korea belongs to us. The communists threw out the Japanese, then the US started a war with the communists. And America evidently lost? Half won, half lost. Today, Korea has been partitioned. There is a communist north and a capitalist south. Onoda is finding it difficult to process so much information. But those waves of warplanes, they never stop. What warplanes? When? Always going west. American bombers directly overhead. More and more all the time. From 1965, in vast formations. Whole convoys of ships, bigger all the time, more and more of them. And you're trying to tell me the war has ended? That was the Vietnam War. The what? Um, did not mean to read that whole exchange, but think there's I think that energy is carried through this book of the perpetual American war. The way that this particular individual holding out his his mission, his fascist attempt to take over the this island in the Philippines is continually re-corroborated by the way in which the US becomes um, the global superpower, as it were, the endless war machine. That there has not been a state where you could be considering the possibility of there being the end of war since World War II. I think that is a cogent through line in this book that I think you could really strongly argue for. It's difficult in some ways, given the things I said before this sort of final point. Um, but I think it's there, and I think that's what sort of pulled me through this. What compelled me through this? Because again, like I think it's really well structured. I think there are really strong bits of writing in here, and I think there is a fundamental sense of disgust with war um, that all vibe with me. Um, but doing that through the character or the personage of this particular fascist I feel complicated about it. Anyway, it's out 6/14/2022. Hey, thanks for not watching.